The day my world shattered began like any other Tuesday in our cozy suburban home in Bristol. I remember the soft patter of rain against the kitchen window as I prepared breakfast, the familiar scent of Earl Grey tea wafting through the air. Little did I know that this ordinary morning would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey. I'm Sarah, by the way. Sarah Thompson. I was 34 then, married to James for 8 years, and living what I thought was a content life in our quaint two-story house on Maple Street. James and I met at university, fell in love over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of a future filled with success and happiness. We married shortly after graduation, and I threw myself into supporting his budding career in finance while managing our home. That fateful morning, I noticed James was unusually quiet as he sipped his coffee, his eyes fixed on his phone. I chalked it up to work stress. He'd been putting in long hours at the firm lately, often coming home well past dinner time. I was just about to ask if everything was all right when he looked up, his face an expressionless mask. "Sarah," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. "What?" I managed to croak out, certain I had misheard. But James just leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "You heard me. I want a divorce. And you," he paused, his eyes glinting with malice, "you will get nothing." Haha. In that moment, every cherished memory of our shared life, our first date at the local pub, the nervous excitement of our wedding day, lazy Sunday mornings curled up on the sofa, felt like a cruel joke. The familiar warmth of our home was replaced by an icy chill that seemed to seep into my very bones. "But why?" I whispered, my mind reeling as I tried to make sense of this sudden upheaval. "James, if there's something wrong, we can work it out. We've always been a team." He scoffed, rising from his seat. "A team? Don't make me laugh, Sarah. You've been nothing but dead weight. All these years, what have you really contributed? I'm the one who's been working my arse off, climbing the corporate ladder. You? You've just been playing house." Each word was a dagger, piercing through the life I thought we'd built together. I wanted to argue, to remind him of all the ways I'd supported him, managed our home, been there through every up and down. But the words caught in my throat as I saw the utter disdain in his eyes. Desperate for support, I did the only thing I could think of. I called my dad. John Williams had always been my rock, the voice of reason in any storm. Surely, he'd help me make sense of this nightmare. But as I poured out my heart over the phone, my father's response left me cold. "Sarah, love," he said, his voice tinged with disappointment. "I hate to say it, but James has a point. What have you really brought to the table in this marriage?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad," I protested, my voice quavering. "How can you say that? I've dedicated the last 8 years of my life to this marriage, to supporting James's career, to building our home." "And what do you have to show for it?" he interrupted. "No career of your own, no real assets in your name. Face it, sweetheart, every achievement, every pound in the bank, it's all thanks to James's hard work." I felt as if the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. In the span of a single morning, the two men I trusted most in the world had not just betrayed me, but had dismissed my entire existence as worthless. The pain of being devalued by them was so profound, it felt like a physical ache in my chest. As the day wore on, I moved through our house in a daze. Every corner held a memory now tainted by betrayal. The living room where we'd spent countless evenings planning our future. The study where I'd stayed up late, poring over our finances to ensure we stayed on budget. The garden I'd lovingly tended, creating a little oasis for us to enjoy. I tried to maintain a semblance of calm, to think rationally about what to do next. But my mind kept returning to all the nights I'd spent meticulously managing our household, balancing bills, planning meals, ensuring that our lives ran smoothly. I'd built a life that many overlooked, yet in the face of their betrayal, I felt completely isolated. As evening fell, I found myself sitting in the dark, staring out at the rain-soaked street. The houses of our neighbors glowed warmly, lives continuing as normal while mine had been turned upside down. I thought about knocking on a door, seeking comfort from a friendly face. But the shame of what had happened, the fear of more judgment, kept me rooted in place. It was in that moment of utter despair that something shifted within me. A quiet spark of defiance ignited in my chest. Who were they to define my worth? What gave them the right to dismiss years of my life as meaningless? I stood up, walked to the mirror in the hallway, and looked at my reflection. The woman staring back at me was pale, eyes red-rimmed from crying, but there was a glimmer of something in those eyes, determination. "You are not worthless," I whispered to myself. "You're strong. You are capable. And you will not let them break you." As I spoke the words, I felt a surge of resolve. I didn't know what the future held, how I would navigate this betrayal, or what battles lay ahead. But I knew one thing for certain: I would not go down without a fight. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with thoughts and plans. I recalled every sacrifice I'd made, every contribution I'd offered to our marriage. Each memory became a brick in the foundation of my newfound determination. I may have been blindsided by their betrayal, but I would not be defined by it. As dawn broke, casting a soft light through the curtains, I made a promise to myself. This was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I would reclaim my power, prove my worth, and show James and my father just how gravely they had underestimated me. Little did they know, their cruel words and dismissive attitudes had not broken me. They had awakened a fierce resilience I never knew I possessed. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and moments of doubt. But as I rose to face the new day, I was ready. Ready to fight, ready to prove my worth, and ready to rewrite the narrative of my life on my own terms. The Sarah they thought they knew, the passive, easily dismissed wife, was gone. In her place stood a woman determined to show the world, and more importantly herself, just how much she was truly worth. The battle for my dignity, my future, and my self-worth had begun, and I was prepared to face it head-on. The weeks following James's bombshell announcement passed in a blur of sleepless nights and tear-stained days. I found myself alone in our once shared home, surrounded by the remnants of a life that now felt like a distant dream. The tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from my parents, seemed to mock me with each passing second, a constant reminder of time wasted and trust misplaced. As the initial shock began to wear off, I found myself grappling with a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal, and a deep sense of injustice swirled within me, threatening to pull me under. I'd spend hours curled up on the sofa, a cup of tea growing cold beside me, as I replayed every moment of our marriage in my mind, desperately trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. Was it the night James got his big promotion, and I spent hours preparing a celebratory dinner he was too busy to eat? Or perhaps it was gradual, a slow erosion of appreciation for all the little things I did to keep our life running smoothly. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the seeds of this betrayal had been sown long ago, nurtured by years of subtle dismissals and unacknowledged efforts. One particularly difficult evening, as I sat at our kitchen table surrounded by stacks of financial documents and wedding albums, the full weight of the injustice hit me like a physical blow. Not only had James undervalued my contributions, but my own father, the man who had taught me the importance of hard work and integrity, had also betrayed the trust that had been the foundation of our family. I remember picking up a photo of Dad and me at my university graduation. His proud smile as he stood next to me in my cap and gown now seemed like a cruel joke. How could the man who had always encouraged me to reach for the stars now be telling me I was worth nothing? The realization of such deep injustice was both painful and eye-opening. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about the people I had trusted most in this world. But amid this inner turmoil, something unexpected began to emerge, a growing sense of my own strength and resilience. I started to see the irony in their assumptions. They had painted me as passive, a mere support to their ambitions and decisions. But as I looked around our home, the carefully balanced budget sheets, the meticulously organized files of our joint accounts, the home improvements I had overseen, I began to recognize the true value of my contributions. Every sacrifice I had made, every late night spent poring over our finances, every carefully planned meal and efficiently run household, these weren't signs of subservience or a lack of ambition. They were investments in our shared future, silent testaments to my strength and independence. This period of solitude became a crucible, forcing me to confront my vulnerabilities and ignite a fierce resilience I had never known before. I began to question the narrative I had accepted for so long, that my worth was tied to my role as a wife, that managing a household was somehow less valuable than earning a paycheck. One rainy afternoon, as I was sorting through a box of old letters and cards, I came across a note from my grandmother. Written in her shaky handwriting just before she passed away, it read, "Sarah, my dear, never forget that your worth comes from within. The world may not always see your value, but that doesn't make it any less real." Those words, forgotten for years, now rang with newfound truth. I realized that I had allowed others, James, my father, society at large, to define my worth for far too long. It was time to reclaim that power for myself. With this revelation came a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I decided that if I were to accept their terms on the surface, I would do so with a hidden agenda. Beneath the calm exterior I presented to the world, my mind was racing with plans and strategies. I began by meticulously documenting every contribution I had made to our marriage. Financial records, home improvement projects, social connections that had benefited James's career. I left no stone unturned. Each piece of evidence became a building block in the case I was constructing, not just for the courts, but for myself. I reached out to old friends I had lost touch with over the years, reconnecting with the parts of myself I had set aside in service of my marriage. Laura, my best friend from university who now ran her own successful marketing firm, was particularly supportive. "Sarah," she said during one of our long phone calls, "I always knew you were capable of so much more than just being someone's wife. Maybe this is your chance to show the world, and yourself, what you're really made of." Her words struck a chord. I realized that this moment of betrayal was not an end, but rather the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to reclaim my power and reshape my destiny on my own terms. I threw myself into research, learning everything I could about divorce proceedings, financial rights, and the legal system. The local library became my second home, its quiet corners witnessing my transformation from a woman shattered by betrayal to one armed with knowledge and determination. It was during one of these study sessions that I overheard a conversation that would change everything. Two women at a nearby table were discussing a new investment opportunity, something about a tech startup looking for silent partners. My ears perked up, and before I knew it, I found myself approaching them, asking questions, and jotting down contact information. That night, as I sat at my desk surrounded by legal books and financial statements, I made a decision that would alter the course of my future. I would invest a portion of my personal savings, money I had squirreled away over the years from my part-time bookkeeping work, into this venture. It was a risk, but something in my gut told me it was the right move. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to play the role of the resigned, soon-to-be ex-wife. When James or my father called to discuss divorce terms, I was agreeable, even docile. Little did they know that behind the scenes, I was not only building an airtight case for my contributions to our marriage, but also laying the groundwork for my own financial independence. The startup investment began to show promise, small returns trickling in that I reinvested immediately. I took online courses in business management and finance, determined to understand every aspect of this new world I was entering. With each new skill I acquired, each small victory in my secret venture, I felt my confidence growing. There were moments of doubt, of course. Nights when the enormity of what I was undertaking would hit me, and I'd find myself curled up in bed, tears soaking my pillow. But even in those dark hours, the spark of determination refused to be extinguished. I would wake the next morning, make myself a strong cup of tea, and return to my plans with renewed vigor. As the date of our first court hearing approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The woman who would walk into that courtroom was not the same one who had stood shocked in her kitchen months ago, listening to her husband's cruel words. This woman was prepared, empowered, and ready to fight for her worth. The night before the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection. Gone was the lost, broken look in my eyes. In its place was a steely determination. I smoothed down my smartly chosen outfit, professional, but not flashy, and took a deep breath. "You've got this, Sarah," I told my reflection. "Tomorrow, you show them exactly who you are and what you're worth." As I turned away from the mirror, I caught sight of the framed quote I had hung on the wall weeks ago. It read, "The most courageous act is still to think for yourself." Aloud, Coco Chanel. A small smile played on my lips. Tomorrow, I would think for myself, aloud and unapologetically. I went to bed that night with a sense of calm purpose. The seeds of transformation that had been sown in that crucible of pain and realization were about to bear fruit. Whatever the outcome of tomorrow's hearing, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the woman they thought they could dismiss and devalue. I was Sarah Thompson, and I was ready to show the world my true worth. The morning of the initial divorce proceedings dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling within me. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my carefully chosen outfit, a modest but smartly tailored navy suit, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the uncertainty that had clouded my eyes for so long, replaced by a steely determination that surprised even me. I arrived at the solicitor's office early, my heart pounding as I clutched my leather portfolio filled with meticulously organized documents. The waiting room was a sterile space, all muted grays and uncomfortable chairs, but I refused to let it intimidate me. I took a deep breath, centering myself as I had learned to do during the yoga classes I'd started taking to manage my stress. When James walked in, flanked by his own legal team, I felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. He looked confident, almost smug, in his expensive suit and polished shoes. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of surprise cross his face. Perhaps he had expected to find me a nervous wreck. Instead, I met his gaze steadily, my face a mask of calm composure. As we settled into the conference room, the air thick with tension, I reminded myself of my strategy. I had decided to approach these proceedings with a calculated resolve. My plan was not to fight every point tooth and nail, but to agree to their terms, at least on the surface. It wasn't defeat, it was strategy. James's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman with piercing eyes, laid out their proposal. As I listened to the litany of assets they claimed as rightfully James's, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. They painted a picture of me as a passive beneficiary of James's success, someone who had contributed nothing of value to our shared life. When it was my turn to respond, I could see the expectation in their eyes. They were waiting for protests, for tears, for the emotional outburst of a desperate woman. Instead, I calmly agreed to their terms, watching with hidden satisfaction as confusion replaced their smug certainty. "I believe these terms are fair," I said, my voice steady. "I'm willing to sign the agreement." The look that passed between James and his lawyer was priceless, a mixture of surprise and suspicion. They had clearly expected a fight, and my easy acquiescence had thrown them off balance. It took all my self-control not to let a smile slip. As we went through the formalities of signing preliminary papers, I could feel James's eyes on me, searching for some clue to explain my behavior. But I gave nothing away, maintaining my composure even as I signed away what they thought was everything I had. Little did they know that behind this facade of compliance, my mind was racing with plans and strategies. Every signature, every nod of agreement, was a calculated move in a game they didn't even know we were playing. After the meeting, as I walked out of the office into the bustling streets of Bristol, I felt a surge of empowerment. The cool autumn air felt invigorating against my skin, a physical reminder of the new chapter one was embarking on. I treated myself to a coffee at my favorite local cafe, savoring the rich aroma as I mentally reviewed the events of the morning. Back at home, I immediately set to work. The dining room table became my command center, covered in files, sticky notes, and my trusty laptop. I had been meticulously gathering evidence of my contributions to our marriage for weeks, and now it was time to organize it all into an airtight case. There were financial records showing how my careful budgeting had allowed us to save for our first home. Emails from James's colleagues praising the dinner parties I had hosted, events that had helped him network and advance in his career. Testimonials from our neighbors about the community initiatives I had spearheaded, enhancing the value of our property. Each piece of evidence was a testament to the life I had built, the value I had added not just to our marriage, but to our entire community. As I sorted through it all, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride in all that I had accomplished, and sadness that it had taken this betrayal for me to truly see my own worth. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. By day, I played the part of the compliant soon-to-be ex-wife, attending meetings and signing papers with an air of resigned acceptance. But my nights were filled with intense preparation. I pored over legal documents, consulted with financial advisors, and continued to nurture my secret investment. I reconnected with old friends and colleagues, building a network of support that I had neglected during my marriage. Over coffee with my old university roommate, now a successful barrister, I gained invaluable insights into the legal process ahead. "Remember, Sarah," she told me, her eyes fierce with protective loyalty, "the law is about facts, not emotions. You've got the facts on your side. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking otherwise." Her words became a mantra, strengthening my resolve whenever I felt moments of doubt creeping in. As the date of the final court hearing approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The stakes were high, but so was my determination. I had one final meeting with my lawyer, a kind-faced woman named Margaret who had become a steadfast ally in this journey. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. We could still contest their terms, push for a better settlement. I shook my head, a small smile playing on my lips. "No, Margaret. We stick to the plan. Let them think they've won. When we present our evidence in court, the impact will be all the greater." The night before the hearing, I stood in front of my wardrobe, carefully selecting my outfit for the next day. My hand lingered on a red blouse, bold, eye-catching. For a moment, I was tempted. But no, that wasn't the image I wanted to project. Instead, I chose a simple, elegant black dress. Professional, understated, but with an underlying strength. Perfect. As I laid out my clothes, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "I hope you know what you're doing," it read. The words stung, but I refused to let them shake my confidence. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. He would understand soon enough. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind racing through all the possible scenarios for the next day. But underlying the nervous energy was a sense of calm certainty. I had done everything I could to prepare. Now, it was time to let the truth speak for itself. As dawn broke, casting a soft light through my curtains, I rose and began to get ready. Each action, showering, dressing, applying subtle makeup, felt like donning armor for battle. I ate a light breakfast, forcing myself to take small bites of toast and sips of tea to calm my churning stomach. Before leaving the house, I paused in front of the mirror in the hallway. The woman who looked back at me was poised, confident, ready. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection. "It's time to show them who you really are." With a deep breath, I picked up my portfolio, filled with the evidence of my worth, and stepped out into the morning light. The courthouse awaited, and with it, the chance to reclaim my dignity, my future, and my true value. As I walked down the street, my heels clicking purposefully on the pavement, I felt ready to face whatever the day might bring. The Sarah they thought they knew, the one who would meekly accept their terms, was gone. In her place stood a woman prepared to fight for her rights, armed with the truth and an unshakable belief in her own worth. The real battle was about to begin, and I was more than ready for it. The day of the court hearing arrived with an air of anticipation that seemed to crackle through the crisp autumn air. As I walked up the steps of the Bristol Civil Justice Center, my heart pounded in my chest, but my steps remained steady. The weight of my portfolio, filled with carefully curated evidence, felt reassuring in my hand. Inside, the polished marble floors and wood-paneled walls exuded an atmosphere of gravity and tradition. I caught my reflection in a decorative mirror, composed, professional, ready. A far cry from the shattered woman I had been just months ago. As I entered the courtroom, I could sense the undercurrent of skepticism among the onlookers. James and his legal team sat on one side, exuding confidence. My father, to my surprise and disappointment, had chosen to sit with them. Their expectant faces told me they were anticipating an easy win, a predictable outcome that would cement their narrative of my worthlessness. I took my seat beside Margaret, my solicitor, who gave me a reassuring nod. "Remember," she whispered, "let the evidence speak for itself." As the proceedings began, I maintained a calm demeanor, even as James's lawyer painted me as a parasitic housewife who had contributed nothing of value to the marriage. I could see the judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, listening impassively, occasionally making notes. When it was our turn to present, Margaret stood up. "Your Honor," she began, "we have evidence that will demonstrate the true nature of Mrs. Thompson's contributions to this marriage." And so it began. With each piece of evidence we presented, I could feel the atmosphere in the courtroom shift. We started with financial records, meticulously kept spreadsheets that showed how my budgeting skills had allowed us to save for our first home, even on James's entry-level salary. "As you can see, Your Honor," Margaret explained, "Mrs. Thompson's financial acumen resulted in savings that were 20 times Mr. Thompson's earnings in the early years of their marriage." I glanced at James and saw his confident smirk falter for the first time. Next came testimonials from James's colleagues, praising the networking events and dinner parties I had hosted. These events, Margaret pointed out, were instrumental in Mr. Thompson's rapid rise through the ranks at his firm. We presented evidence of my community involvement, the local children's reading program I had started, the fundraising I had done for the neighborhood park renovation. Each piece built a picture of a woman who was far from the passive, contributing nothing figure they had tried to portray. As the evidence mounted, I could see the shock becoming palpable. The narrative that had been so confidently built by James and his team was crumbling before their eyes. The judge's expression had shifted from neutral to increasingly intrigued, her pen moving rapidly across her notepad. But the real turning point came when we presented evidence of my secret business venture. Margaret dramatically unveiled financial statements and business records that showed the growth of my investment into a thriving enterprise. "Your Honor," Margaret said, her voice ringing clear in the now silent courtroom, "Mrs. Thompson didn't just manage the household. While supporting her husband's career, she also built a multi-million-pound business from the ground up." The gasps in the courtroom were audible. I allowed myself a small smile as I watched James's face turn from shock to disbelief to something akin to fear. My father, I noticed, had gone pale, his eyes wide as he stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. The judge leaned forward, clearly interested. "Mrs. Thompson," she addressed me directly, "could you tell us more about this business?" I stood, smoothing down my dress, and spoke clearly and confidently. "Certainly, Your Honor. 2 years ago, I identified a gap in the market for eco-friendly home organization solutions. Using my skills in budgeting and home management, I developed a line of products and an online platform to sell them. The business has grown exponentially, with our revenue last quarter exceeding £5 million. The silence that followed my statement was deafening. I could practically see the wheels turning in everyone's minds as they reassessed everything they thought they knew about me. James's lawyer attempted to recover, arguing that the business had been started during our marriage and therefore should be considered a marital asset. But we were prepared for this. Margaret presented documentation showing that I had used my own savings, money I had put aside from my part-time bookkeeping work over the years, as the initial investment. Furthermore, she demonstrated how I had kept the business entirely separate from our marital finances. "Your Honor," Margaret concluded, "Mrs. Thompson's business acumen and financial independence are clear. Far from being a passive beneficiary of the marriage, she has been an active contributor and a successful entrepreneur in her own right." As the judge called for a recess to review all the evidence, I felt a profound sense of vindication. The truth of my worth, my contributions, and my capabilities was finally out in the open. During the break, I noticed James in deep, agitated discussion with his lawyer. My father approached me hesitantly, his face a mixture of shame and awe. "Sarah," he began, "I had no idea." I held up a hand to stop him. "We'll talk later, Dad," I said firmly. "Right now, I need to focus." When we reconvened, the judge's decision was swift and decisive. Not only did she rule against James's attempt to claim my business as a marital asset, but she also awarded me a significant portion of our marital property in recognition of my contributions to James's career and our shared life. It's clear to this court, the judge stated, that Mrs. Thompson's contributions to this marriage, both tangible and intangible, have been grossly undervalued. Her business acumen, financial management skills, and entrepreneurial success are commendable. As the judge continued to outline her decision, I allowed myself to really look at James for the first time since the hearing began. The arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. In that moment, I felt no joy in his defeat, only a sense of sadness for the years we had wasted and the love that had been lost. When the judge finally adjourned the session, the courtroom erupted into a flurry of activity. Reporters who had gotten wind of the surprising turn of events clamored for comments. James and his team huddled together, likely discussing the possibility of an appeal. Through it all, I remained calm, shaking hands with Margaret and thanking her for her brilliant work. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, I caught sight of my father again. He was standing alone, looking lost and regretful. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw a glimmer of the pride that had been missing for so long. Outside the courthouse, the autumn sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city. As I descended the steps, I felt as though I was walking into a new chapter of my life. The battle wasn't entirely over. There would be paperwork to file, details to iron out, but the hard part, the fight for recognition and respect, had been won. A reporter approached me, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel about the court's decision?" I paused, considering my words carefully. "I feel vindicated," I said finally. "But more than that, I feel empowered. This experience has taught me the importance of recognizing and valuing your own worth, regardless of others' perceptions." As I walked away from the courthouse, my phone buzzed with messages of congratulations from friends who had been following the case. But the message that caught my eye was from Laura, my old university friend. It simply read, "I always knew you were extraordinary. Now the world knows it too. Drink soon to celebrate." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the setting sun. Yes, it was time to celebrate, not just the court victory, but the rediscovery of my own strength, resilience, and worth. As I hailed a taxi to take me home, I felt lighter than I had in years, ready to embrace whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The Sarah who had entered that courtroom was not the same Sarah who was leaving it. I had gone in fighting for what was rightfully mine, but I had emerged with something far more valuable, an unshakable belief in myself and my capabilities. The future, I realized, was bright with possibilities, and I was more than ready to explore them all. The days following the court hearing were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. As I sat in my home office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and a constantly buzzing phone, I couldn't help but marvel at how drastically my life had changed in just a few short months. The quiet suburban house that had once felt like a prison of expectations now hummed with possibility. My company, Green Home Solutions, was garnering attention not just from the press following the divorce case, but from major retailers and eco-conscious investors. What had started as a small online store selling my handcrafted, sustainable home organization products had blossomed into something far beyond my initial dreams. As I pored over the latest sales figures, a notification popped up on my computer screen. It was an email from a major department store chain, expressing interest in carrying our product line. I felt a thrill of excitement course through me. This was it, the big break we'd been working towards. Just as I was about to reply, my mobile rang. It was Laura, my old uni friend who had been my rock throughout this ordeal. "Sarah, darling," her voice chirped through the speaker. "Have you seen the article? You're practically famous." I chuckled, reaching for my tablet to pull up the news site she mentioned. There it was, splashed across the homepage, "From housewife to tycoon, the Sarah Thompson story." The article detailed my journey from a supposedly passive housewife to a successful entrepreneur, framing it as an inspirational tale of female empowerment. It's a bit surreal, isn't it? I mused, skimming through the glowing praise of my business acumen and resilience. Surreal? It's bloody brilliant is what it is. Laura laughed. Listen, a bunch of us are going out tonight to celebrate. You absolutely must join us. No excuses. I glanced at my cluttered desk, thinking of all the work I still had to do. But Laura was right. I deserved to celebrate. All right, you've twisted my arm. Where and when? After agreeing on the details, I hung up and leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a moment of reflection. The Sarah of a year ago would have demurred, claiming she had too much housework to do. But I wasn't that Sarah anymore. As evening approached, I stood before my wardrobe, contemplating what to wear. My hand hesitated over the conservative dresses I'd favored during my marriage, then moved decisively to a sleek red number I'd bought on impulse weeks ago, but hadn't had the courage to wear. Tonight was about embracing the new me in all her glory. The gastropub Laura had chosen was bustling with Friday night energy. As I walked in, I spotted our group at a corner table, raising their glasses in a cheer as they saw me. The warmth of their welcome washed over me, a stark contrast to the coldness I'd endured in the final years of my marriage. As we chatted and laughed over craft beers and gourmet burgers, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with a tall, distinguished-looking man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair. "Excuse me," he said, his voice warm and slightly nervous. "You're Sarah Thompson, aren't you? I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I just had to come over and express my admiration for what you've accomplished." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks, still not entirely used to such direct praise. "Thank you. That's very kind of you to say, mister." "Oh, forgive me. I'm Richard Hartley." He extended his hand, which I shook firmly. "I'm actually an investor specializing in eco-friendly startups. I wondered if you might be interested in discussing potential opportunities for expansion." My friends exchanged excited glances as I considered Richard's offer. This could be exactly the boost Green Home Solutions needed to go global. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Hartley. Perhaps we could set up a meeting next week?" As we exchanged contact information, I couldn't help but notice the way Richard's eyes crinkled warmly when he smiled. It had been so long since I'd felt that spark of connection with someone. Pushing the thought aside, I refocused on the potential this meeting could have for my business. The next week flew by in a flurry of preparation. I spent hours refining my business plan, practicing my pitch, and ensuring I had all the facts and figures at my fingertips. The morning of the meeting, I dressed in a smart, eco-friendly suit made from recycled materials, a product of one of our recent collaborations. The meeting was held in Richard's office, a modern space with stunning views of the Bristol Harbourside. As I laid out my vision for Green Home Solutions' future, I could see Richard's eyes light up with interest. "Sarah," he said as I concluded my presentation, "I have to say, I'm impressed. Your business model is solid, your products are innovative, and your passion is evident. I'd like to propose something a bit unconventional if you're open to it." Intrigued, I nodded for him to continue. "Rather than a standard investment, how would you feel about a merger? I have a company that produces eco-friendly cleaning products. Combined with your organization's solutions, we could create a one-stop shop for green home care." I sat back, my mind racing with the possibilities. This was more than I had ever anticipated, a chance not just to grow my company, but to revolutionize the industry. "That's quite a proposal, Richard. I'd need to think it over, consult with my team." He smiled understandingly. "Of course. Take all the time you need. This is a big decision." As I left the office, my head was spinning. This potential merger could catapult Green Home Solutions into the big leagues, making it a household name across the UK and beyond. But it would also mean significant changes, possibly relocating, definitely expanding my role. Over the next few weeks, as I mulled over Richard's offer and discussed it with my advisors, life continued to throw surprises my way. My father, who had been noticeably absent since the court hearing, reached out to me. "Sarah, love," his voice was hesitant on the phone. I owe you an apology. A big one. I was wrong about you, so very wrong. Is there any chance we could meet for a coffee? I'd like to try to make amends, if you'll let me." His words brought tears to my eyes. Despite everything, he was still my dad, and I had missed him. "Okay, Dad. Let's meet at that little cafe near the harbor, the one Mum used to love. Our reunion was awkward at first, both of us tiptoeing around the hurt and misunderstandings of the past year. But as we talked, really talked, for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a weight lifting from my heart. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that meant more to me than I had realized. As the weeks turned into months, my life continued to evolve in ways I never could have predicted. The merger with Richard's company went ahead, creating a powerhouse in the eco-friendly home care market. Our products were flying off the shelves, and we were making real strides in promoting sustainable living. My relationship with Richard grew alongside our business partnership. What started as mutual respect blossomed into friendship, and then, slowly but surely, into something more. He was everything James hadn't been: supportive, kind, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. One crisp autumn evening, almost exactly a year after that fateful court hearing, Richard and I stood on the balcony of our new office building, overlooking the city we were helping to make a little bit greener. "You know," Richard said, his arm warm around my waist, "when I first read about you in that article, I never imagined we'd end up here. You continue to amaze me every day, Sarah." I leaned into him, feeling a contentment I had almost forgotten was possible. Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? A year ago, I thought my world was ending. Now, I can't imagine it being any more perfect. As we stood there, watching the sun set over Bristol, I marveled at the unexpected twists my journey had taken. From a supposedly worthless housewife to a successful entrepreneur, from a broken marriage to a loving partnership, from feeling trapped to being truly free, every step, every challenge had led me here. The Sarah who had once been told she was worth nothing now knew her true value, not just in pounds and pence, but in the impact she was making on the world and the lives she was touching. As I looked to the future, I felt nothing but excitement for what other unexpected twists might be waiting just around the corner. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of changes in my life, I found myself standing at the threshold of a new chapter. The aftermath of the court hearing and the subsequent developments had transformed not just my circumstances, but my entire outlook on life. It was a crisp Monday morning when I walked into the sleek, modern offices of what was now Thompson Hartley Eco Solutions, the merged company born from my unexpected partnership with Richard. The office buzzed with energy as our expanded team worked on new product lines and marketing strategies. As I made my way to my corner office, I caught sight of my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The woman staring back at me exuded confidence and purpose, a far cry from the shattered individual I had been just a year ago. My assistant, Emma, greeted me with a warm smile and a steaming cup of Earl Grey. "Morning, Sarah. The team from the Bristol Echo is here for your interview. Shall I send them in?" I nodded, taking a sip of tea to calm my nerves. Even after all this time, the idea of being in the spotlight still felt a bit surreal. The interview was for a feature on successful local businesses making a positive impact on the environment. As I settled behind my desk, I couldn't help but marvel at how drastically public perception of me had shifted. The journalist, a young woman named Olivia, entered with a friendly smile. "Mrs. Thompson Hartley, thank you for taking the time to meet with us," she said, setting up her recorder. "Please call me Sarah," I replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. "And thank you for your interest in our company." As we delved into the interview, discussing the company's growth and our commitment to sustainability, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. Olivia seemed particularly interested in the personal aspect of my story. "Your rise to success has been quite remarkable," she noted. "How do you feel your experiences have shaped you as a business leader?" I paused, considering my words carefully. "You know, a wise person once told me that our greatest challenges often become our greatest strengths. The adversity I faced, it taught me resilience, adaptability, and the importance of believing in oneself. These aren't just personal qualities, they're essential in the business world too." As the interview progressed, we touched on various aspects of my journey, from the initial betrayal to the courtroom revelation, and finally to the unexpected partnership with Richard. Olivia's eyes widened as I recounted the twists and turns. "It sounds like quite the roller coaster," she remarked. Do you have any regrets about how things unfolded? I shook my head, a small smile playing on my lips. Regrets? No. Would I have chosen this path if given the choice at the start? Probably not. But I've learned that sometimes the universe has a way of pushing us towards our true potential, even if the journey is painful at times. After the interview concluded and Olivia left, I found myself lost in thought. The conversation had stirred up memories, some painful, others triumphant. I decided to take a walk to clear my head, grabbing my coat and heading out into the crisp autumn air. As I strolled along the harbourside, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my father. Saw the advert for your new eco-friendly kitchen line. Proud of you, love. Dinner this weekend? A warm feeling spread through my chest. Our relationship had been slowly mending over the past months. It wasn't perfect, but we were both trying, and that meant the world to me. I quickly typed back a reply, confirming our plans. My wanderings led me to the small cafe where James and I had our first date, all those years ago. On an impulse, I decided to step inside. The interior hadn't changed much. Same cozy corners, same aroma of freshly ground coffee. As I waited in line to place my order, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Sarah. I turned to find James standing there, looking somewhat uncomfortable. It was the first time we'd come face to face since the court hearing. He looked older somehow, the stress of recent events evident in the lines around his eyes. Hello, James, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a sense of closure. He shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure of how to proceed. I saw your interview in the Business Times last month. The company seems to be doing well. I nodded, offering a small smile. It is, thank you. How have you been? We engaged in awkward small talk for a few minutes, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. As I listened to him talk about his new job and apartment, I realized something profound. I had forgiven him. Not for his sake, but for my own. The anger and hurt that had once consumed me had transformed into fuel for my own growth and success. As we parted ways, James hesitated. Sarah, I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. I looked at him for a moment, seeing not the man who had betrayed me, but a person who had played a role in shaping the woman I had become. Thank you, James. I hope you find happiness too. Leaving the cafe, I felt lighter somehow. That chance encounter had provided a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. As I walked back to the office, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Richard. Fancy a surprise? Meet me at the pier at 6. Or something warm. Intrigued, I replied with a quick, "You're on," before heading back to wrap up my day at work. That evening, as I approached the pier, I saw Richard waiting with 2 life jackets and a mischievous grin. Ever been night kayaking? He asked, eyes twinkling. I laughed, shaking my head. Can't say that I have. Well, there's a first time for everything, he said, helping me into the life jacket. As we paddled out into the calm waters of the Bristol Channel, the city lights twinkling on the shore, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. Here I was, doing something I'd never imagined, with a person who supported and cherished me for who I truly was. Under the vast expanse of the star-studded sky, Richard and I talked about our future, both personal and professional. We discussed expansion plans for the company, our shared vision for promoting sustainable living, and our dreams of starting a family together. As we floated there, surrounded by the gentle lapping of waves and the distant hum of the city, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me to this moment. From the depths of betrayal and self-doubt, I had risen to find a life more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. The woman who had once been told she was worthless had discovered her true value, not just in monetary terms, but in the impact she was making on the world and the lives she touched. I had learned that resilience isn't about never falling, but about rising every time you fall, stronger and wiser. As Richard and I paddled back to shore, hand in hand, I looked to the future with excitement and optimism. The path ahead was uncharted, full of potential challenges and triumphs. But this time, I was ready for whatever life might throw my way. My journey had taught me that every ending is also a beginning, every setback an opportunity for growth. As we stepped back onto solid ground, I took a deep breath of the cool night air, feeling grateful for every twist and turn that had led me here. The Sarah who had started this journey, broken, betrayed, and undervalued, was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who had found her voice, and who was ready to make her mark on the world. As Richard and I walked home, our fingers intertwined, I smiled to myself. This wasn't just an aftermath. It was a new beginning, brimming with endless possibilities. And I was ready to embrace every single one of them.